Have you ever poured a glass of tap water and just wondered, it's clean, it's safe, but how does it get that way? Today, we're diving deep, way past the simple filters, to uncover the hidden battle happening in your water against chemicals so small you can't see, smell, or taste them.
And this whole idea really started with a fantastic question someone posted online. They asked, what about all the stuff we wash down the drain? The chemicals from soap, shampoo, and yeah, even the medicine our bodies don't use that, well, you get the picture. It's an amazing question, and trust me, the answer is way cooler than you'd think.
All right, so picture it. You've got this massive amount of water heading into a treatment plant. Where in the world do you start? Well, you start with the obvious stuff.
First things first, you gotta get the big chunk out. We're talking about huge screens that are there to catch all the leaves, branches, and any trash that's found its way in. That's step one. After that, the water moves into these gigantic, calm tanks, and all it does is sit there, and when it sits, gravity does its thing, and all the heavy stuff like sand and grit just slowly sinks right to the bottom. Simple enough, right?
Okay, but here's the thing. That was the easy part. That was cleaning up the stuff you can see. The real challenge is the invisible threat, the chemicals that are actually dissolved in the water.
Yeah, this is where it gets really tricky. We're talking about all kinds of dissolved chemicals, from pharmaceuticals, from pesticides on farms, from industrial runoff. These aren't little particles floating around. They're tiny, individual molecules. And your standard filter is just not going to catch them.
And listen to this. We're not talking about just a few rogue chemicals. One report found over 700 different types of these volatile organic compounds in our drinking water sources. That is a staggering number of different things to deal with.
The official name for these things is synthetic organic chemicals, or SOCs for short. And the bottom line is, they're just too small, and there are too many different kinds to just physically strain them out. It's kind of like trying to catch smoke with a fishing net. It's just not going to work.
So if you can't filter them out, what do? You need a totally different strategy. You need some kind of chemical trap. And that, my friends, is where our hero enters the story. Activated carbon.
Now, this is not the charcoal you use for a barbecue. Not even close. Activated carbon is specially engineered to have this unbelievably huge internal surface area. This gives it what's called sorptive properties, which is really just a fancy way of saying it acts like a super powerful chemical magnet, literally pulling unwanted molecules in and holding on tight. And get this, the stuff it's made from is pretty surprising. We're talking about things you'd never expect, like coconut shells, wood, peat, even pecan shells. They take these simple materials and, through a special process, turn them into this incredible, high-tech filtration material.
And here is where your mind is going to be blown. Because of this massive network of microscopic tunnels and pores, a single gram of activated carbon, we're talking about the weight of a paperclip, has more surface area than an entire football field. Just let that sink in. A football field's worth of grabbing power, all packed into something that weighs almost nothing.
So how does this microscopic battlefield actually work? Well, it all boils down to a scientific process with a very specific name: adsorption.
Now listen closely, because this is key. It's adsorption with a D, not absorption with a B. A sponge absorbs water, soaking it all up inside. Adsorption is different. It's when those contaminant molecules are pulled out of the water and physically stick to the surface of the carbon. It's more like lint sticking to a sweater.
But it gets even crazier. On that football field of surface area, there's a constant battle for real estate. See, some chemicals form a really strong bond with the carbon, while others have a much weaker grip. And what happens is, the stronger chemicals can actually come along and kick the weaker ones right off their spot, sending them back into the water.
And this leads to something that seems totally impossible. This chemical competition means that sometimes the water coming out of the filter can actually have a higher concentration of a certain chemical than the water that went in. You heard that right. For a little while, as stronger chemicals take over, the filter can suddenly release a whole bunch of the weaker ones it was holding on to.
So with all this drama happening on a microscopic level, how well does this stuff actually work? Well, this chart gives you a pretty good idea. For most of the big concerns, granular activated carbon, or GAC, is an absolute rock star. It's fantastic at removing the compounds that cause bad tastes and odors, and it's highly effective against pesticides and industrial solvents. It really is the workhorse of modern water treatment.
But, and this is the big but, this is not a set it and forget it kind of deal. Keeping our water safe is a constant, ongoing challenge.
It's a job that never, ever ends. And here's why. The water coming into a plant is always changing, depending on the location and even the season. Those chemical battles we talked about, they're super complex and hard to predict. Plus, eventually, the carbon filter gets full. All the spots are taken, and it has to be cleaned out or replaced. It's this dynamic, moving target that demands constant monitoring to make sure everything is working right.
Which really brings us to the final, and maybe the most important question of all. Our best line of defense against all these invisible chemicals is basically a super high-tech sponge. But what happens if and when we create a new chemical that the sponge just can't catch? It's a pretty sobering thought, and it's the perfect reminder that the fight for clean water is a battle that's never really over.